And we are live. Welcome to Diversity with Diana podcast. This is episode 20 of our live recorded sessions with a guest on the show. I am welcoming Madam Wilkister Aduma. Wilkister, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for
I can't
having
hear
me.
you. Yeah, so Wilkister is a youth advocate. Karibu sana. So Wilkister is a youth advocate and governance enthusiast. She's the founder of an initiative called Run for Office, whose main objective is to encourage and support young people to run for office and lead while challenging the stereotypes that young people who run for public offices only seek clout and cannot necessarily lead. Now, Wilkister, I'd love to go through your bio, but this is like a fantastic opportunity for you to introduce yourself to the podcast and tell us who you are. I see that we have one live viewer already, and I'm sure more are going to be streaming in, and they'll be watching this. So please introduce yourself to the podcast. Tell us who you are, and then we'll get to our discussion today. Karibu sana.
All right. Thank you, Diana. So, my name is Aduma Wilkister. I am, first of all, a child of God because I believe everything we do emanates from Him. And after that, I'm a young woman passionate about the development of people, good governance, and democracy. And for the past 8 years, all I've done is work within that particular passion. And I think to date it's been good, rewarding, although there's been turbulence in between, but I love what I do.
That is amazing. Wait, I know you have rushed through some of the milestones that you've achieved as a young person, because how are we going to trust that Wilkista will give us advice that is actually feasible if you don't tell us about your journey? So just take a moment to maybe start saying how you got into this sector, the governance sector in the first place, and then tell us about your wins. What are some of those moments that you as a young person was like, is this truly me? Like, this is what I have achieved as a young person in leadership or in political leadership in Kenya. Yes, Wilkista.
Okay, so I think journey goes back to when I joined Nairobi. I enrolled
Yes.
of commerce, the procurement option. In as much as I studies, uh, in that moment, it felt I was hard for uh, commerce as a career. And I remember, feeling very drawn to changing matters on Kenya and being involved in that kind of space. Although I couldn't quite put it that this is what I wanted to do at the time, but I just knew I wanted to help influence legislation and laws that govern certain aspects of the country, especially with regard to young people. So I reached out to a friend of mine on Facebook. We were not exactly friends that meet normally in the physical spaces. So I remember continuously asking her, to meet and have conversations. And then in the end, we became friends. And then one time I reached out and I asked her whether there were opportunities to volunteer that she knew of. This was in my second year at the University of Nairobi. And she did give me a bunch of options, one including a political party that needed a volunteer at the time to do office admin work. So, well, I threw myself in. I was like, why not? This is good experience. I'll be close to legislators and people that influence policy and regulation in Kenya. So I dived in. I took up the opportunity, and for a whole year I volunteered at Labour Party of Kenya. I know most people would wonder what I'd be doing at a political party when it's not campaign season or elections. And political parties actually do a lot of things beyond just the election period. And that is what I helped do. The membership had to be kept to date, having and keeping programs for young people and for the Women League, and generally making sure that there was a fluid communication flow between the National Executive Council of the party to other party organs. So I did that for a year. Every day I went 8 to 5, and I still had my class going in the evening at the University of Nairobi. And I remember after a year, that's when I think I had my child, and then I took a back burner kidogo before I dived back in. So when I went back to work at the party, the position of executive director was vacant. And I remember Professor Julio Jambo really encouraged me that that is a role I was up to the task in terms of filling up. And they believe that my, volunteer work at the party did give me experience that I needed to take up the role. Because essentially, most of the time, I'd find myself at the office alone, running most of the day-to-day activities. So I did put in my application, and I got the spot. I got the spot as the executive director of Labour Party of Kenya.
Right.
I think at the time I was the youngest. I don't know if there's been any, but I was just getting 25 when I was the quote unquote CEO of a political party, and these are opportunities that I had to come by, and they are really big political fights that go into such positions. So I think that's something that I have on my cup that I really like to mention.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and you should mention it with pride because it's not a mean achievement. Imagine, I don't know whether the challenge would be that you're a female or that you're young, but imagine having that dual dynamic that you're not only young, but you're also female in this society of ours, but you are able to achieve it. That just means that, first of all, you had values that people appreciated, the soft skills that people talk about. And then experience was not even a matter that came to question, especially when it comes to someone that has discipline, passion, and commitment, which is something that I'm sure you must have shown. So congratulations on that. And yes, you possibly were the youngest female political leader or leader of a political party at the time. What about the challenges? Because I'm sure it's not all rosy and beautiful and pompous. What about the challenges that you faced as a young person now, before we go to what advice you would give a young person that wants to be active in a political party management or leadership? Yes.
So before I even dive into that, I'd like to mention that shortly after I resigned, after serving at Labour Party, and I also served on a presidential secretariat that fielded a candidate for the 2017 elections. I think I withhold the name at this point, but I think that's also something that's good to mention, so that when I talk about the challenges, it's collective, from having worked in a presidential secretariat to working for a political party secretariat. So as you've mentioned, the aspect of being young and being a woman in that particular space is not very friendly. I think it's not news that our politics is very patriarchal, and it's unforgiving for young people, especially when a slight mistake or mishap happens under your supervision. So I believe that I think the political tides came into play during the time, and I think I found that my voice within the National Executive Council, which is the body of the political party that makes decisions, my voice was really sort of curtailed in a way, and I didn't find myself making decisions with the big wigs, in as much as the role stipulated that you're an ex-officio member of that particular National Executive Council. So I think that was my biggest challenge. Other than that, I think the challenge was volunteering while broke. It wasn't easy because you have to show up daily and remain committed and consistent, because sometimes I meet young people who ask about opportunities and they're not willing to put in time or any of their resources for that matter to get experience or learn. So I think that was one challenge for me as a new volunteer, someone who's also going to school. I think those are the two biggest things I went through. Not having some resource to facilitate my being at the political party, and the patriarchal system in our politics in Kenya, and I think globally as well.
Right, right. And thank you for, just being open and candid with us in this discussion, because many people that come to the podcast are people who are interested in the governance space, and specifically people who are actually interested in supporting young people to have the best governance in Kenya. Now, there is something that I saw in your profile that really stood out for me, that you actually advocate for democracy. What is your take on democracy, and why do you think it's the best way of governance? I know it's what we practice in Kenya, but whether democracy is the best way to lead a country and have the best development for the country is another thing. So why do you take your time to single out that you're a democracy advocate, Wilkister?
Right. So the fact that we enjoy certain freedoms in this country, the fact that we have moved from a one-party state to a multi-party state, I think is something that doesn't exactly come easy. Counterparts across the globe, across the continent, still are suffering with from some of these ills. So for me, the particular reason why democracy makes sense is the people are at the center of everything. The people being at the center of everything for me is everything in itself, because you really cannot purport to lead a people without the people themselves. You cannot purport to have solutions for the people without them. So the fact that the sovereign power belongs to the people in a democracy speaks to me and strikes a chord with me in a very special way. And for me, that is the main reason why I'm a proponent of good governance and also democracy. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I mean, I do understand, certainly as also a governance person myself, I do understand the importance of democracy. I am, I am compelled to keep asking the question so that we have the listeners that are tuning in to understand why it is important to vote and why it's important to take a stand and make a decision that will basically tie up the management or the utilization of our public resources to be under these people's leadership. Many young people do not vote. That is a reality. And now the younger generation that are even younger than us are even on another level. They do not seem to care about governance, or they do not want to be involved. I have seen that the education system is trying to now have the kind of management by the student council to have even young people in primary school to start voting for their leaders. But the culture and the understanding and appreciation of why people have to vote is not coming to play. What would you speak about that on a general level, but then also on a level to have a call to action to young people to join political parties and join its leadership and management? Yeah.
So as young people and as citizens of a nation, the only thing you have at hand is your voice, and your voice can be used in different avenues depending on how you participate within the democracy. So voting particularly is one of the places where you can exercise your right as a citizen of the country and also exercise your voice, because at the end of the day your vote is your voice. If you cannot vote because you feel like because most people say ideally that we sometimes show up to vote, but we do not feel like our voices are heard during the vote, or there's rigging of votes and whatnot. But what I'd like to say and reiterate is that the power of the people and the power of the numbers cannot be stifled. It cannot be erased. You cannot overwhelmingly vote in someone or vote out someone for that matter and have all your votes taken away from you. Even if someone were to rig that particular election, they'd only match up to a certain number but not take out the person you voted for. So I believe in the democracy setup. There are so many ways that young people can participate. One is that vote, which you've talked about. Two is involving yourself in political parties, because at the end of the day, political parties are the ones that are in existence to capture power, rather. So when political parties capture power, it means you as a person who is a member of a certain political party have a voice within that power setup to speak to certain issues or to influence certain issues. So as a young person, also to strengthen your voice, make sure you join a political party and hopefully advocate for your political party to be in power, so that at the end of the day, you also have proximity to power. And having proximity to power does give you, does give a megaphone to your voice when you speak. So there's that as well. And then even as a citizen of the country, you're allowed to petition any government institution. You're allowed to question them on accountability grounds. You're allowed to do all these things. So even taking government agencies to court, for example, on irregularities of certain issues, you're allowed to do that. So I think it is important for us to note that these are avenues that we can use to participate in democracy. And I think it's really sad that young people don't vote, because it's projected that about 5 million new voters are going to be under the age of 35. And also a new projection that the median age that is the new voter registry is going to be around 26 to 27 years of age. So if young people are not turning up to vote, then it's going to be worrisome, in the sense that who is going to protect the interest of the young people at the ballot? If young people do not protect their own interest at the ballot, then it becomes detrimental to our own selves and to the development of the country as a whole. Looking at a population of over 60% of young people, if we turn up to vote, it means we do not have a voice in the leadership structure. Still, we will come to the same issues of complaining about, Kenya, the leadership doesn't embrace young people, the leadership doesn't embrace ideas by young people, or even the values, both intrinsic and instrumental, that young people have to offer. So I think it is important for us to note that we can take part and be politically active in different ways. And it's also very, very important for us to know that we need to turn up to vote.
Right. And I'm really excited that, your career path has been in the governance sector, but even currently you're not serving in a political party, whether employed or, let's say, an active member. And that's what I wanted to sort of bait the people that are going to be listening to this conversation. I said that, yes, Wilkister is one of the youngest political party leaders, in the Secretariat here in Kenya, but currently you're not doing that. That doesn't mean that you're not politically inclined to, let's say, practice your civil right as a citizen, a public citizen. I know you have been part of a process that called to action, or rather that called to account a public agency, which is NYC to Itakayo. You are part of that campaign, and I just wish for you to speak about it, and also now speak personally on your career trajectory and how you're going to probably see yourself getting in and out of political engagement, whether you want to be a candidate or whether you want to support another candidate. Yes.
All right. So I think in terms of my career trajectory, especially, I think for those who are following the conversation, how I transitioned from a political party member or official to working in the civil society. For me, the line is very thin between civil society and political parties, because ideally we are almost pushing for the same thing. Is what we want to see is change. And in a political party, if you do not capture power, the change aspect becomes very elusive, in the sense that you're not able to influence much. And for me, what changed everything is that I realized that within the civil society, or as a public citizen at that, I was able to exercise certain rights that may have not been necessarily available to me in a political party. So this is how I joined the civil society, and I push for change from this end. I help and train young people to build movements that influence change from this end. And one of the campaigns that you've mentioned, the NYC to Itakayo, is one that's dear to me, because the National Youth Council really is a body for young people, to represent the interests of young people, and should be strong even in terms of advocating for young people's presence in boards, in parastatals and all that. So NYC, National Youth Council, not being as powerful as it was mandated in the National Youth Council Act 2009, was really something sad to see. And most people just saying it's there and it's a shell. And then what also made young people want to exercise power through the National Youth Council is the National Youth Council ideally was supposed, when it was set up, the vision was to have young people vie for positions right from the ward levels and to the constituency levels where they would represent other young people. But it became so difficult because young people found themselves in a situation where, especially those who participated in the National Youth Council, where they were competing with the politicians of the day in terms of clout and the power that they amassed from having run for these offices in their wards and in their different constituencies. So I believe that political influence did, change the trajectory of NYC to the negative, because it sort of took away some of its power, because the politicians are the ones in power, and when they influence things to a certain direction, it leaves us with very little, to use. So NYC Tuitakai was basically to restore the former glory of the National Youth Council, to see it serve young people as it's supposed to. Well, we did submit a memorandum to Parliament as a group. At the time, we were about 50 organizations, both community-based organizations and NGOs. We also had a few faith-based organizations joining in the memorandum, and we submitted it to Parliament based on the bill that was tabled was sponsored by Keter, Honorable Keter. And we sought to have the functions of the National Youth Council as proposed in the bill changed to the ones that were proposed in the National Youth Council Act 2009. So we followed up the process. Unfortunately, the bill passed as it was, and our considerations were not taken in. Sad as it was, I think we did make ourselves known, and we did learn in the process on how to engage with Parliament and how to legislate also as well. So from there on, we had the birth of a consortium of youth serving organizations, which we still work on till date. Of course, some people dropped off because the interest at the time of formation was the amendment bill of the National Youth Council, but then it moved on. For us now, it's engaging with Parliament meaningfully as young people. So we still can legislate through the consortium now on issues pertaining to young people, and not just bills that have the word youth in them, but generally bills that affect young people adversely. So we still, relate with the legislators in that sense, and I think we are also mini legislators in the process.
Yes, and I don't think it's me. I think we're actually legislators, I think we are helping to change and form policy. And why I say that is because I know you and I had a chat during the People Dialogue Festival that was convened by the Center for Multi-Party Democracy. But I keep smiling under the breath, and I've had comments being made to some of the presentations or proposals that senators made in Senate regarding the BBI, the Building Bridges Initiative in Kenya. And I will not say which exact comment I knew came from the youth convening at the People Dialogue Festival, but much later I will speak on it, and just to say that we are not mini legislators. They actually listen, and some of them have positions of power, but they need us, the technocrats, to give them information. So then it is for us to actually put our act together and then give them the right information so that they can be passed in Parliament. But anyway, you are still on your comments, Wilkister.
Yeah, so you asked whether I'd be a candidate in the elections in 2022. And my answer is not yet for me. I don't feel the time is ripe for me to run for office. And I felt my skill, my passion would better serve other young people who are running for office. And that's why the campaign on Run for Office was birthed, because of young people taking the back burner in terms of running for public offices. And interestingly, this started last year, but interesting, just last week we had some young people applying for commissioner at the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission, and we did support the bid for young people to be commissioners, and we sent in a petition to the what is the body that was shortlisting candidates. We sent in a petition to them to have them include a young person, at least 2 young people, in the as some of the commissioners within the people that they will select after the shortlisting process. So we are also still crossing our fingers for that, because our interest at the end of the day with the campaign is that young people occupy public offices, and we're not just saying young because of course there's the issue of age. We are saying young because young people are competent right now. I mean, it's the dynamics are so different from when our fathers were our age and the qualifications that they had. But nowadays it's so normal to hear a young person who's probably just turning 23 or 24, having already their undergraduate on their master's degree and already practicing some jobs. I mean, it's so different for us in the sense that even in as much as you'll find a young person in school right now, they'll be doing their course and working certain jobs, either 1 or 2 jobs, during the day, and having evening classes. So I think the way we've acquired our experience as young people, the way we are looking at meritocracy as young people is very different. And I believe the commission needs to take and acknowledge that young people do merit these positions, and we've seen that. And it's not okay that if one young person falters on their role, that means that every young person will falter on their role. I mean, it's different how different people deliver for certain offices. So we're really crossing our fingers that the selection panel gets to appoint at least 2 young people to the commission. And if they don't, I think the next course of action for us would be, we want to see real change, and we're not just chasing the noise around wanting a young person. So the next course of action for us, if this petition is disregarded, is that we'll, of course, go to court to make sure that they have at least 2 young people in the commission or the electoral management body.
Right. And that's a really great process. I had no idea that you were doing that. I would have actually loved to support it. I know that a few organizations had reached out and asked, are you going to do a campaign to this effect? Are you going to apply for that opportunity? Are you going to do this and that? And I'm just thinking, many people actually shied away from it. I think the IEBC commissioner's vacancy that had been advertised, and it would be interesting to see how they would pan out. Definitely inclusion has to be an element. Now, I just wish to acknowledge some of the comments that we've received as our live chat was going on. We have Kenneth Kane who wrote, true power should always be with the people, and that is in agreement to a statement that you had made earlier. Mbuki Kasema also said, I agree to the people. I agree, but do the people know what? We, the citizens, are very gullible. So I think that was saying that when you give power to the people, do the people understand what the power means? That we tend to be very gullible, and that actually is in line with Kenneth's second comment again, that says politicians manipulate the youth with money in exchange for their power. Now, I'm actually about to choke. Only because I'm just like, I'm glad for this platform that is meant to demystify politics. And I'm also glad to see many other platforms like this also budding up, because young people need to understand that politics is not foreign, and politics is not a discussion that needs to happen every 5 years. It is an ongoing thing. The legislators are always making new policies or new laws every other day. Therefore, it is our duty as the citizen watchdog, as civil society, but also just as public citizens, to be part of that process and understand what they are doing and whether they're actually representing us the way they should. Therefore, I am hoping that such discussions, and Wilkister, we're happy to support any initiative or any convening that you would want to convene that actually pushes for youth inclusion, and especially young women inclusion. Why we say this is that we do not want to have the cases of last minute appointments not based on merit, but based on, let's say, nepotism or favorism based on proximity to party leaders and stuff like that. We do want to help to nurture a league of well-qualified young people that can enter into political leadership and also enter into positions of power and adequately help us to change this country. So it is very exciting to see that. Now, this is an interesting question that I feel like I want to pose to you. What would you tell a younger Wilkister who is a teenager? What would you tell that Wilkister who is in high school about life in general, but then towards your responsibility as an adult and towards political participation? What would you tell a younger Wilkister?
Right. Wow. I think that one caught me off guard. It feels like an emotional question talking to my younger self and talking to myself in my teenage years. So I think what I'd probably tell myself is to not be afraid, because I realized that I sort of kept my potential in a dark corner somewhere, and I was waiting for someone to tell it to me, even though I knew that I had it. So I think to my younger self, I'd say not to be afraid, to dream of, to think of, to do anything that I thought myself able and fit to do at the time. I think politically, I'd say Heko Wilkister, because you joining politics at that young age enabled you to understand a lot of dynamics and a lot of things that happen in the political spaces and world that most people understand when they are 40 and in those senior years. So I'm glad that the younger Wilkister threw herself into the political space at that young age. Yep.
That is really amazing to hear you talk to your younger self and actually encourage yourself and speak from a position of love, like, from a position of friendship and a position of saying, Heko Wilkister, you did a good job when you were young. Thank you, Wilkister. I think there's something else I do wish to ask, and this is idealism versus reality. I was privy to a conversation or a recounting of a conversation that happened between a candidate who lost in a political bid and a candidate who won. And the candidate who won had recounted what process he had gone through following a certain political party leader, calling the bodyguards, putting himself in the line of vision, or I don't know, the line of sight, by ensuring that the political party leader would see him, and then having conversations to follow through, ensuring that his nomination went through. And that process really made me realize that possibly sometimes that we think ideally you go and the people will vote for you, and then you get into representing the people in parliament. But the reality on the ground is that for you to even get that nomination, it takes another account to play. So therefore, my request to you is just to talk a bit about idealism versus reality, and how sometimes when we see things happen, or we even hear political leaders make certain statements, maybe help us understand sometimes what goes on in their minds for them to make certain statements that ideally sometimes seem like they're just pledging allegiance and not really taking a stand on position of, or taking a position on the account of principle and values, but on the account of loyalty to their parties. Yes, Wilkister.
So first, I think before I talk about the idealism and reality in politics is one, when you talk about nominations, I've realized that most young people don't understand what nominations mean. They understand nominations from the point of view that a political party will nominate you to parliament because of maybe a reserved seat, or with regard to how many seats they garnered in the political, in the elections. So there's nomination in two parts, okay? So there's the first nomination where when you want to vie as a political candidate under a certain political party, the political party has to endorse you to run under their party ticket. So before you run under their party ticket, that endorsement process where you have the members of the political party voting for you to be the flag bearer of the party, that is a nomination process, and you get a nomination certificate. The second tier of nomination is where the political party submits party lists to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission for consideration for nominations to the positions, pending the number of seats that they will garner in the elections. There's a whole formula on how it's worked out. So this is where most of the time you hear people, quote unquote, saying this person gave their daughter the position to be nominated to parliament, or their relative or their kinsmen, and things like that. So it's important for young people to understand that nomination is in two parts. On why and how politicians pay homage or patronage to certain people in political parties. The first thing, when you're a member of a political party, you have an act, right? As a political party, you have laws and regulations that when you are a member, you sign and say that I append my signature to having said yes to the following values, said yes to the following laws and regulations. So one of the things that is very, very important that we might not know is that says that you're supposed to espouse party ideals at all times, support party positions, and generally propagate party matters outside of the premises of the political party. So in most times you'll find a member of a certain political party, of course, most of the time taking sides with the political party, however hard or however irrelevant whatever is being pushed for looks like. For example, you're seeing the Building Bridges Initiative process and the Amendment Bill 2020. You've seen political parties whipping their members for not taking the same positions as the parties, and it is allowed because these people signed and said that they would support party position and they would espouse party ideals. Okay, so in terms of the nomination process where you get your certificate from the party to run under the party ticket with other political parties for a certain seat, say member of parliament, there's a lot that goes on behind that process. And I think so many people have so many different stories that some are worried that if you listen to them, you'd be so worried about whether we still have a moral fabric as a people engaging in politics. And that particular place is all about your strategy as a person, because when you do decide to engage in politics, forget that you're a young person, forget that you're a woman, and forget that you're disadvantaged in any way. And I think that is the weakness that we have as young people and even as young women, that when we enter the political space, we assume that there are certain privileges that will be accorded because probably we are young or we are women. So I think the first thing is to strip yourself off of those titles and just enter the political space like any other politician who really wants to lead people. So I think that would be my number one advice, because when now paying homage to a political party leader who probably has their son up in line with you, and you don't have a chance, but that, and they even give you certificates. The people who've gotten nomination certificates, and only to find that at their names are not there, and they were given a fake certificate, and someone else a certificate. So it's really
Yeah.
unfortunate how the politics plays at the end of the day. But I think it's all about your strategy, especially your entry strategy is very important as a young person who's looking to get into politics, and not expect that there are certain privileges or favors that will come with you being young or you being a woman. I think we need to, recalibrate our brains in that sense, because you will avoid some of the stories where you gave a token of sorts to someone and it didn't work out. In the political world, this is very normal. to give a
Right.
token to someone, please vouch for me in this space, and they don't vouch for you. Whatever token you give, they will, whether it's in cash or kind, they will take it. But it
Absolutely.
doesn't mean that they will. And one important thing that people miss out on is politics is about numbers. It's about how many people you have behind you. So if one is able to make sure that the number of people you have supporting you and behind you are solid, then you have a bargaining point, you have a bargaining chip. Because at the end of the day, when people sit down, and even some of the politicians who we say are seasoned and unmoneyed, they will call you to the bargaining table. Most of the time, someone will even ask you, possible that you step aside for this amount of money so that we can field candidate, BAC. So at the end of the day, even your worth, being brought to the table to discuss something like that. Most young people are
Right.
pushovers. They're not brought to discuss things like that because they've not leveraged on the power in numbers to make sure that they're on the bargaining. So I think that's really important for young people to note. And I think the idealism comes
Right.
from most of the time people who cross over civil society into politics, because they realize that the change they were pushing for in civil society is not necessarily what's there in politics. And even how the electorate listens to you when you present yourself as a candidate is very different. And they can sniff fraud from a distance. They can. Doesn't matter how mediocre they look, doesn't matter how average the voter is, they can sniff out someone who is not ready to lead them from a mile away. So I think when we do get into this, we need to assert in ourselves that really I'm stepping into this space to lead the people to a certain place, or to realize certain changes. And I think in the end it all works out. Just throw yourself in as a person, not as a privileged anything, and just fight it out with everyone else.
Right. I just wanted to just like get back to highlight what you said about youths and women in general needing to strip their position or their titles as youth or women when it comes to political leadership. And to be honest, that's what happens in the private sector. So in the private sector, nobody cares that you are the head of department and you're a youth or you're a woman. Everybody cares for performance targets and the bottom line. Is the company achieving its target? And therefore, in political leadership, it's not any different. And I just wanted to reiterate that because I think when we get into the next phase of supporting whichever young people that want to get into positions of power or leadership or representation, and just for inclusion and other purposes, we would want them to know that the moment you get in, strip yourself of that title and start working. There is no one who is going to pity you because you're a young person and they expect you to fulfill certain tasks. Now, somebody has asked a question, and I'm not surprised to see that question coming into this part of the discussion. Winnie Nyasiri is asking, is there room for independent candidates in our current political space? Now, just to mention this one, I know Winnie is a young person in her 20s. I would say that I think young people, and the question is still for you, Wilkister, because you're our guest on the show today, but young people do not want the havoc of being in political parties. So they want to have that flexibility and the freedom of saying, I'm an independent candidate. I want to do A, B, C, D, and then, whatever the case works. Is there a benefit for young people to actually participate as candidates through political parties? And what is the disadvantage of them not doing it, or the advantage thereof? Like, basically take the question from Winnie that asks, is there room for independent candidates in our political space? And is it very important? This is something I'm adding now. Is it important for them to be part of political parties, or should they just continue getting to the ballot box as independent candidates? Yes.
Okay, so interesting that Winnie asks that question, because at Run for Office, for us, it's very important that young people are members of political parties, because we are supporting, multi-party democracy to flourish. And it's becoming rather rampant that the people who are vying as independent candidates are most of the time young people. And I think the highest number of independent candidates per the IBC 2017 report were those that vied for member of county assembly. And statistically, those who vied for members of county assembly were mostly below 40, which politically is considered young. Vying as an independent candidate is very hard. They don't tell you this, and it's very expensive too, because there are certain fees you have to pay that may not be the same fee that a person who's in a political party will have to pay. So it's really high for a young person, and it's tedious, okay? It's tedious in the sense that when you're in a political party, there are certain benefits you derive from the political party secretariat that they would readily have information for you in terms of clearances at, for example, the Register of Political Parties, at the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. So you might miss out on those value adds that come from a political party. The Kenyan political space, yes, does allow for independent candidates per the Constitution of Kenya 2010, but you need to understand that the political parties are in the business of capturing power, as I'd mentioned earlier. And the business of capturing power means that political parties want to get the majority voice in county assemblies. They want to get the majority voice in the parliament, in the National Assembly, and also in Senate. So in the event that you do make it to Senate or National Assembly or County Assembly as an independent candidate, what is the value of your voice in that space? Because political parties also, as I'd mentioned, are in the business of espousing party ideals and pushing party interests and position, okay? So if the party position in parliament, say to support person B to be the speaker, and the opposition says they're supporting person C to be the speaker, what is your voice as an independent candidate? One person, where political parties are lobbying through the members in the political party. So for me, if you ask, the independent candidate contributes little to changing certain or pushing certain interests. I know they do push interests for the people, but at the end of the day, in terms of pushing this interest for the people, it's very difficult because your voice is like a doesn't even cause a ripple. So that is a disadvantage of vying as an independent candidate as opposed to being in a political party. And I hope you understand that laws are passed based on lobbying and positions and caucusing and whatnot. So in the county assembly, it's the same. In the same, in National Assembly, it's the same. So you do not want to get to a point where you have influence because people are seeing that we voted you in. But when you really get to the real job, you have no influence.
Wow, you've taken us through the whole, I feel like the overview of political parties and engagement, and not just from a youth perspective, but actually from a general perspective. And my feeling, just as I was listening to you and nodding and trying to type at the same time, is that this conversation cannot be exhausted in just one discussion. And I know leading up to maybe the political season that Kenya is bound to be heading towards, I do think that these conversations are very critical. And I think that, I would love to again bring you back on board based on the questions that some of our listeners and the viewers would be keying in, just to discuss a bit more. Number one, of course, I love your composure and your understanding of political party systems. Of course, again, and your experience as somebody who has worked in the front line, including with a presidential candidate in your party in the last elections. So I think it's very important that we actually have you in the podcast again to specifically discuss that. I'm trying to see if we have any other additional comments from the viewers that have tuned in. But if not that, let's now come back to you. So your parting shot, we've been chatting like this for 47 minutes. I just wish for you to maybe discuss a bit more about Run for Office. Where is the platform? Are you on social media? Where can people find you? And then how can they engage with you meaningfully? to be able to build that critical mass as young people, especially looking at the data that you've just mentioned to us. For example, having the projections of the next election as voters, the median age of the voters being 26 years old. That is a very youthful population. Yes, Wilkister.
So Run for Office is a campaign. It's a national campaign to run for public offices and to occupy these seats, because at the end of the day, we need a critical mass of young people who are grounded to occupy these spaces for us to realize real change that we so yearn for as a country and as a people. So that is the mandate of Run for Office, is to encourage, support young people to get into these positions of political authority and influence, especially public offices that will enable us see real change or push for real change as young people. So yes, there are handles on social media. On Facebook, there's Run for Office. You can reach out in the inbox. On Twitter, there's Run for Office. You can reach out in the DM. And on Instagram as well, this Run for Office, you can reach out in the DM. It's a campaign that's fully run by young people for young people. So be sure that these young people will reach out to you when you do reach out through the different avenues. My parting shot, I think, would be, I earlier today was training young people on movement building, and they were coming up with a new movement. And one of them asked that, Wilkister, do you think Kenya is ready for a revolution? And I asked him, so a revolution of what sorts? And he said,
Yeah.
do you think we are just rid of all the bad leaders and just have good people leading us? And my answer to him was this, is that revolutions happen every day. It's just we are not keen enough to see that a revolution is happening. When there are more young people occupying a certain space or a certain seat, that's already a revolution, whether it's one person, two people, 10, 100, or a million. That's already a revolution. And we need to be keen to see when the revolution is happening, or you find yourself outside of the revolution. And there's nothing that's going to come like a big bang theory kind of. The thunder is not going to come from heaven. The earth is not going to open. There's not going to be raining samosas for us to know that a revolution is happening. Revolutions happen every day, and they start
Right.
with here, your mindset. So you revolutionize your mindset, and then you can revolutionize everyone around you and make sure that you're in a position of political authority and influence to have the real power that will push the change that you seek.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Wilkister. I mean, nobody can top up that closure. You're saying that this is what I like to say, that the person you need to conquer the most is yourself. And you've just said it so beautifully. The revolutions happen every day and they start from here. I mean, that's just like a quotable right there. And I know I'll be tweeting about it later so that people can also understand what we've discussed, and just maybe the small tidbits that can be tweetable, basically. So thank you so much, Wilkister. I'll definitely be having you on the podcast again. I am very grateful that you created time to be here today. It's a whole 51 minutes of your time that you have accorded to be with us at the podcast and also share your knowledge. So thank you very much, Wilkister. Asante. And
Thank
thank
you
you
for
to the
having me,
people.
Diana.
Thank you. And then those that tuned in today, I can see Mbuki. I see so many people. I see Kenneth. I see Winnie. I've seen others who have also liked the page itself. Thank you very much. We hope to have a very good show again next week. Bye.